Yep, we are indeed live. So, to everyone who is already here, welcome to a special Twitch stream on the Ecuador elections and a look into the Belt and Road Initiative. So, okay, wait a second. Okay, there we go. I am online. Okay, great. Yeah, so welcome to the stream. Very much basically looking forward to the chat today with two really terrific guests. So figure might as well have them introduce themselves first. So Bay, why don't you go ahead first? Maybe just tell people a bit about who you are, like maybe how you got started and what you're looking forward to talking about today.
Sure. Hey, everybody. This is Bay Area 415. Let me see if this is working. Do you all hear me good?
Okay, I'm looking at the Twitch chat. I can hear you. I can hear you, and I don't see any issues from the Twitch chat. So
Lovely. Okay. Let's start again. Hey, everyone. This is Bay Area 415. I am a Marxist-Leninist out here in the United States from the Bay Area, obviously San Francisco. I work as an attorney by day, but a YouTuber by night. Really defending already existing socialist countries and anti-imperialist societies, and really try to explain more about their systems, ideologies, and how it fits into Marxism-Leninism and anti-imperialist ideologies. So, really excited to hear more about what's going down in Ecuador. I mainly focus on China and trying to explain to people how it is on a socialistic and communistic pathway and whatnot, but ultimately how important their role is into liberating others from the capitalist grip that is the West. And I know we have a lot to talk about with BRI, and the Ecuadorian election, but long story short, yeah, that's a little bit who I am.
all right, thanks. So Ollie, why don't you go ahead?
Hi everyone, I'm Ollie Vargas. I'm a reporter here in Bolivia, and I've been here throughout the process since the coup in Bolivia. But now, we're looking to expand some of our coverage. We're going to be launching soon as Calsatra News, a new website in a couple of weeks, looking to cover Latin America as a whole in English. So we've been, the Ecuadorian elections are obviously clearly very important for the region, for the future of the left in Latin America and the project of Latin American unity, of sovereignty, development. So I'm really glad to be here and discussing this issue.
All right, terrific. So I will ask one quick question before we get into this. So how did you like get involved in Caution News?
Well, we launched it, so we started it, myself and another great journalist, some of you may know, Camila Escalante, used to be a colleague of mine in Telesur English. But yeah, that's where I was when the coup took place at the office in Ecuador. And, I decided, I'm myself Bolivian, and I decided I had to be here. So I came to Bolivia myself independently. And then I started working with a radio station here, which the office I'm talking to you from, Radio Calsatra Coca, which was the main media outlet that was the only media outlet that was giving a voice to the people who are fighting the coup last year. So from here, we decided to launch an English language section to communicate to people in the US and in Europe, etc. And yeah, here we are. We've been, we've done a lot of work, mostly focused on multimedia, but now we're looking to expand and have our own website. And this whole project is something that's done with the social movements here. The radio is owned by the Sixth Federation of the Tropical, which is the largest campesino union. which Evo Morales himself is the president of, the organization that founded the movement called socialism, which is today in government. So yeah, we're just trying to do something new, trying to do something that's linked to actually existing movements, and yeah, I mean, hopefully we can expand that.
All right, that's terrific. So I'll give a little intro on myself. So I'm Aidan Jonah, editor-in-chief of the Canada Files. I guess since I asked the motivations, I was just like a first-year student, and I just found real frustrations with the media atmosphere. In hindsight, I kind of didn't realize the existence of some outlets, but I ended up lucking out in a sense because a lot of the things that I've covered and have been fortunate enough to cover would not have been touched on anywhere else. So it's been quite the ride, and definitely just pretty excited to be on with two terrific guests. So for anyone new to basically my Twitch, please do consider following. Do at least 2 weekly streams, a Canadian foreign policy stream, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then Sunday night, Canadian domestic news. And there may be room for like yet again a kind of a special show, maybe like once a week, based on like scheduling for me. So that's the deal of it. But let's get into business. The Ecuadorian elections. It's been a chaotic, rather chaotic affair. So Ollie, it's basically let's set the scene now. Who are the major candidates in this race, and what are their politics? What's the backstories?
Well, the Ecuador had their presidential elections last Sunday, and the party, the candidate that came first with the most amount of votes is a guy called Andrés Arauz. He is the left candidate. He was a junior minister in the government of Rafael Correa and considered a trusted person of Rafael Correa, the former leftist president of Ecuador. Andrés Saras came first. The votes are still being counted, but are almost finished, and he's on about 32.7% of the vote. In second place at the moment is the neoliberal candidate, who's was the director of one of the most important banks in Ecuador, and was, I should say, deeply involved with the economic collapse that Ecuador suffered throughout the 90s as an economy minister during that neoliberal period. He's come second with about 19, if I'm not mistaken, about 19.7% of a vote. And in third place, only recently moved down to third place from second place, is a sort of liberal candidate called Yacu Perez. He's indigenous. And in Ecuador, the indigenous movement is very divided. It has a left and a right factions within it. Yacu Perez is of the right faction. Yacu Perez is someone who's supported the coups in Bolivia, the anti-indigenous coup in Bolivia, promotes, supports intervention in Venezuela, has held meetings with the US ambassador, has, said on numerous occasions about restoring good relations with the United States. Yacu Perez's party voted for the neoliberal measures of Lenin Moreno, the austerity measures of Lenin Moreno in the so-called humanitarian law that was passed a few months ago. So he is certainly a more progressive option compared to the banker's candidate, but he still represents a continuity of the neoliberal project that has, that took grip in Ecuador 4 years ago, and is doing it with a more sort of progressive facade, using issues such as indigenous politics, environmental issues, to try and cover that. But it seems now that he'll be out of the race. He's on 19.4%, something like that. So it looks like he won't make it into the second round. It looks like the second round that will be held in April will be between the left and the neoliberal candidate, Guillermo Lasso.
All right, for sure. Thanks a ton for the breakdown, Ollie. So I'm gonna bring up an article that I think basically, if anyone hasn't read, it's definitely a must read. Which is a rather interesting article by Ben Norton. And admittedly, like I'll have to give Ben credit here because I did not know the extent that Yaku Perez was really a supporter of imperialism there. So yeah, it's quite this. I don't know if I'd say stunner really, but I guess it really kind of shows the dynamics, especially like there's no easy answers. I gotta say, it's quite the shocker, quite the shocker. So I guess was there like a kind of? I assume there'd be like an awareness of this in Ecuador before, but like what was kind of like the kind of prevailing view on basically Yaku Perez, basically before we kind of got closer to the elections?
Well, I think Ecuador is someone who has enormous amount of support among commentators in the West, the sorts of journalists and mainstream media outlets who, you know, like to talk a lot about populist, charismatic populist leaders in Latin America, irresponsible, you know, populists, etc., and looking to divide, to break the image that Venezuela, Bolivia, Cuba, the image that they represent the Latin American left. That's what they're trying to break down. So they're looking to promote sections of what they would see as the left or progressive movements that are outside the anti-imperialist sphere. That, you know, maybe have some progressive policies, but are still happy to be within, what one would call the US sphere of influence, and doesn't have a problem with IMF imposed solutions, doesn't have a problem with US foreign policy. So I think this is what Yaku Perez represents. And a lot of the people promoting this, of course, are people who supported the coup in Bolivia. People would call Evo Morales an irresponsible populist. You know, one of the region's only indigenous leaders in history supported a coup that massacred indigenous protesters that came out and called for the return of democracy and for the right to vote. So now they're trying to use the affection that indigenous peoples have, the solidarity that I think most people around the world feel for indigenous people, for indigenous movements, to say, this is the real left. When in fact, what they're trying to do is, divide the anti-imperialist left and present it as a sort of regressive section, and to promote those sections, those progressives that are happy to accommodate US imperialism. A lot of this centers around the issue of natural resources. It's the main reason the Latin American left that has governed in the region has run up against the United States is on the issue of natural resources. Governments like Bolivia, like Ecuador under Correa before, nationalized natural resources and use the profits from it to fund national development, fund schools, roads, hospitals, the basic things that a country needs to be able to provide a standard, dignified standard of living for people. And in countries like Latin America, it's very difficult to raise the amount of money that a government would need just through taxation alone, because the structure of the economies in Latin America is that often the majority of people work in the informal sector, which means that they don't pay tax. Their economic activities aren't taxed. In terms of rich people taxing the rich, first of all, there's not many rich people. Second of all, the state is often too weak to be able to enforce rigorous regulations. That means people have all their money on offshore accounts, etc. So the number one way for the state to be able to get the revenue it needs to fund national development, to launch public transport projects, to build state industries, to build roads, to build the necessary schools and hospitals. The only way a state can get the money to do that is by nationalizing one's natural resources and running them, efficiently, managing them efficiently so that you can earn a profit and have those profits go into the coffers of the state to fund development. That's what that's the model that the US is opposed to. And that's why the US is more than happy to work with someone like Yaku Perez, because his whole wedge issue against the existing left, against the left represented by Rafael Correa, he says, oh, we're opposed to extractivism. We don't believe that, we should exploit natural resources. Really, this is a cover to argue against the public control of natural resources. So we can see that how the US can exploit these liberal issues, and in this they get support from groups like Extinction Rebellion. So we can see this is the liberal face of imperialism, the progressive face of imperialism.
All right, so I think you're probably one of the best people to speak to the space. So let's look at how the U.S. relates to the Latin American region, especially since we're talking about Ecuador. Basically, obviously, Korea had fairly positive relations with China throughout. So can you maybe speak to the differing approaches between China and the U.S. In terms of the Latin America, and let's say particularly in Ecuador?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay. Can we let Bay jump in quickly, and then we'll bring you in?
Go. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say, I know Perez. Reading up on Perez, it's almost a neoliberal puppet in the shade of opportunism and socialism. All this rhetoric about environmentalism and whatnot, trying to be progressive, is just a liberal front to not only hedge their bets between a socialist and a banker, but also just to bring bring compromising parties so the United States can win. We all know that the Socialist Party with Correa and the Citizens Revolution is aligned with China and trying to bring more trade and more established relations with China to develop their economy. And for the most part, Perez is not for that. As we read in this article, this extremely important article that calls out all his ties with the United States from his time in, I believe, in Michigan, all the way up to aligning himself with Ned funding organizations, and being against being for the Bolivian coup and whatnot. We can all already know where this is headed. And despite Perez being a very liberal candidate, he's nothing more than what Latin Americans shouldn't expect any changes. Whereas with the Citizens Revolution, I think not only is the nationalization programs and everything else that Ollie was talking about would open up, but an establishment of China's economic trade would really revitalize the economy, bring in the jobs that people need, and really break away from the Western grip that they're still trying to have in Ecuador. I mean, Ecuador has been, really, maybe Ollie can dive into this more, but Ecuador has been really under, not the boot heel, but, they've lost, a couple leaders, or a leader, a very progressive leader, to quote unquote airplane crashes, when in reality there's been some tampering that was alleged against the CIA and whatnot, and it all speaks to the Monroe Doctrine, the intervention that United States has always been in Latin America. But this new sort of tactic, when you throw in China, of trying to trying to defeat the socialist candidate through any means necessary is really shiesty, really, really messed up, because they're going to back a liberal, they're going to back a banker, they're going to back whoever they can in order to get rid of the socialists. And if the socialist still wins, who knows what other means that they may take. And if history is any proof of this, they may really take to more auspicious and more ferocious sort of means to secure their interests.
Absolutely. So I think we'll talk about basically the Belt and Road Initiative a bit more later, but I think there's a video basically before we dig back into elections more specifically. You sent me this in advance, and so I can I'll quickly put it up on screen because I think it's a great watch. So we will just give this a watch. I'm going to quickly pause the screen share and then start that again so I can have the sound on. Let me know if there's any issues with the sound, but I've tested it a few times and I haven't had any issues. So, all right. And yeah, if you want to basically pause it, just let me know within the Zoom chat, and basically I'll pause it there. So,
the Belton Road Initiative, first proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013, has evolved into a transcontinental trade and infrastructure network covering the Eurasian continent, Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, and the South Pacific region. Its reach extends to some 4.4 billion people. That's about 65% of the world's population. Made up of an overland belt, the Silk Road Economic Belt, spanning Central and Southern Asia and Europe, and a maritime road, the 21st century Maritime Silk Road of shipping lanes reaching all the way to Africa and the Mediterranean, the Belton Road Initiative aims to boost economic prosperity through international cooperation on a scale never seen before. Modern and groundbreaking in its global outlook, the Belton Road is actually deeply rooted in history, with the ancient Silk Road dating back more than 2,500 years, when camel trains transported everything from spices to silk between East and West. Today, those camels have been replaced by thousands of planes, trains, and ships, with trade volume between China and its Belt and Road partners hitting $6 trillion in the past 5 years. Trains can now travel 12,000 kilometers from Yiwu to London faster than ships, while the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is literally lighting up the region with green energy projects, putting an end to decades of blackouts. Developing infrastructure has been key to the Belt and Road Initiative's success and is also key to boosting the service industry, with Chinese tourists visiting BRI countries up 77% in just 5 years. Connecting a huge range of cultures, languages, and people of diverse backgrounds, the Belt and Road Initiative is also a major platform for cultural exchanges. An estimated 60,000 African students are taking courses in Chinese universities. That's up from just 2,000 in 2003. By April 15, 2019, 126 nations and 29 international organizations had signed Belt and Road cooperation documents with China. So, how does a project as huge and international as the BRI work? It's all about cooperation and dialogue. Every 2 years, the Belt and Road Forum, or BRF, for International Cooperation is held, providing forums and meetings for thousands of delegates from all around the world to discuss progress and moving forward. In 2017, the first ever BRF was held in Beijing. 29 national leaders and more than 1,600 participants attended that event, the biggest of its kind under the Belt and Road framework. More than 270 concrete results were achieved in 5 key areas, namely policy, infrastructure, trade, finance, and people-to-people connectivity. This April, the second forum will take place in Beijing again. This time, there will be many more participants than the previous one, with thousands of delegates from over 100 countries and international organizations expected to attend. This year's forum follows the theme Belt and Road Cooperation, Shaping a Brighter Shared Future, and will see a conference organized especially for the BRI business community. The 2019 forum will be a chance to take stock of the initiative 5 years on and lay out a new roadmap for the coming years.
All right, so honestly, a really terrific video there. Can't thank Bay enough for sending that to us. Initial thoughts on that before we get back to the elections.
Well, I was going to say, that just really sets the stage for what the United States is trying to stop. And it is really doing any means necessary to not only, issue a lot of propaganda against China for either imperializing or trying to profit from other countries, and obviously twisting that narrative in that way, all the way down to disrupting elections that for candidates that are for this opportunity from China. And it's really obvious that even when we look at even Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia in particular as well, where Evo Morales was about to do a huge lithium deal with China until the coup. It's really obvious the hand that the United States is trying to play, but also how China is not really intervening as well. And we're obviously seeing the implications in Ecuador as well, and how even something like this is at least a important talking point for the candidates. So yeah, that's where I think it's really important that the Belt and Road initiatives is really understood by everyone, rather than this sort of selfish grab by China trying to imperialize all over the place.
All right, terrific. So let's kind of get back onto the focus more of the Bolivian elections. So one of the things that was one of the more, yet again, it's not a surprising thing, but the CNE in Bolivia. Maybe Ollie, you can talk about like what have they been up to, and what's their involvement been in this election campaign?
So do you say CNE?
Yeah, the CNE, the election commission. Like how have they influenced the election?
Well, I think there's a huge amount of irregularities during the Ecuador's elections that they've just had. Actually, I think it's a mistake of Andrés Saras' campaign not to make a bigger deal of this. I think they lost a lot of votes because what happened, due to COVID regulation, or using the pretext, the excuse of COVID regulations, they didn't allow many people to be in the polling station at once. And in huge number of areas, they were blocking people altogether. The people were only going in one or two, and people were standing outside in huge long queues for numerous hours. And where people started dropping out of the queue was in the coastal regions of the country, where it's incredibly hot. You can get up to around 40 degrees, incredibly humid. And those are the areas where the left is strongest. It's particularly in places like Manabí, Esmeraldas. These are coastal areas that were worst affected by the horrific earthquake that the country had in 2017. I don't know if people maybe remember that. It was one of the worst earthquakes that Latin America has experienced for many decades. And that Rafael Correa was in government at the time. And his response to that, his government's response to that, has been praised widely, internationally, and for the people of those regions. They have a huge amount of affection for Rafael Correa. Personally, they see him as someone who came in and provided solutions for them at the time of dire, desperate need. So those are the areas where people start dropping out the queue. And the other thing that the Electoral Council did to manipulate the situation is in Ecuador is actually it's obligatory to vote. You have to vote by law, and if you don't vote, you get fined. But then when this happened, the Electoral Commission said, we're not gonna fine people if they don't vote. If they want to go home, you can go home. And so, whatever arguments you could have about whether voting should be compulsory or not, the fact is, where voting is compulsory, that's something that benefits the left, because who doesn't vote in normal elections? It's people who feel most disenfranchised, working class sections of society. So when those people were voting, that's something that, for the most part, in general, tends to benefit the left. So the Electoral Council's decision during the middle of the election day to say that we're not going to charge fines for people who didn't vote, essentially, withdrawing the entire law that makes voting obligatory, that was something that definitely manipulated the situation. And I think Andrés Saras still won in all those coastal regions. I think the victory could have been even larger. He could maybe be close to a first round victory, but with all the chaos there's been, they haven't pursued that. I think it's a mistake to not pursue that. They were making a lot of noise about it on election day itself, though. So yeah, I think the elections in Latin America are a difficult affair, especially where the OAS is involved, where the US Embassy is involved. In Bolivia, I think there was every intention to carry out an electoral fraud. Their first attempt was they were trying to not hold elections altogether. They kept delaying the date using COVID as an excuse. But I think what guaranteed a fair election in Bolivia in October 2020 was the mass organization there was among ordinary people. In August, when they suspended the election, there was a huge uprising across the whole country. A general strike, people erected barricades along all the key roads of the country, total paralysis. And in fact, a lot of there are a lot of sections of the movement, they were calling for the immediate overthrow of the state. And it looked like it was something, that could happen. The state was overwhelmed. It couldn't respond. It couldn't, defeat this movement in a serious way. So they knew that if they tried, to manipulate the vote, then they would have an uprising on an even larger scale on their hands. So that was something that put fear into them and helped ensure that Bolivia had fair elections in October last year. In Ecuador, it is a different situation. So we have to see. I think there's a lot of room still for the state to try and steal this election. We're going to be going into the second round now, where last year there was a huge amount of conflict over issues of election irregularities.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for a rather fulsome answer there. So basically, I guess one of my questions would be to Bay. Let's look at basically the mess that is the election here. How do elections basically for like representatives and figures in the government work in China, and like compared to like somewhere like Ecuador, especially under the Moreno regime?
Well, in China, we're talking about a completely different system.
Yeah, of course.
We're talking more about democratic centralism, where at the baseline in China, the townships and citizenships, and maybe even on the county level, you have people that can elect candidates that parties put up. Also, there are, I believe, 8 political parties in China. Obviously the biggest one being the Communist Party of China, and the other parties are able to put up their candidates and whatnot and run in these elections, but ultimately from there it goes into a meritocracy system from the parties. The parties are able to elect from these levels, to county level, to municipality, to a province level, all the way up to the national level. And the national level is the top political legislative body is the National Congress, National People's Congress, NPC. And that's where all they have this session where all the party members, including from the 8 political parties, come together and submit their requests for legislation that they want to get passed. And things like that happen. That's sort of their extent of their electoral system. Comparing that to obviously parliamentary plurality or other democracies, Western democracies, it's vastly different. Obviously, there's the finance laws, public finance laws, how limited that is and whatnot. It's no comparison. I say, there's a lot that goes into um, building up the party and looking at a person's merits rather than their pocketbook, and their political experiences that they put in. Now, unfortunately, there comes a time in these systems where things are so corrupt that the most experienced politician does not mean that they're going to be working for you. And we either see this although we see some of it in Ecuador, whether you have a banker who has some political experience or a, eco-liberal that is backed by the United States that has some political experience, all the way up here to the Democrats and Republicans who just need political experience, but not even that if you're running as a capitalist, as we've seen with Donald Trump. It doesn't reflect what China's system is like. And uh, I really do admire how you mix democratic centralism, where a party discusses and debates, but when they come to an agreement, they are a solid line, mixed with meritocracy and how popular. There is a sort of variable for popularity, but it's not an overwhelming sort of corrupt system. Not that I say that corruption doesn't happen in the in China's system. That's not what I mean. But looking at the problems that democracies and parliamentary systems are having, it really does throw in the question: is this really good for the people? And obviously this goes back to the dictatorship of the proletariat. Obviously, what Marxist-Leninists try to uphold. We really want what the people desire, and when it's like this in Ecuador, we can obviously see how Correo and the Citizens Revolution is really important in upholding at least what the people desperately need right now.
Thank you so much for a rather thorough look through there. Um, okay, terrific. So one of the other aspects I wanted to get to, because Ben Norton did a few really good articles, was a one around the exit polling in the elections, which yet again, like, I can't give enough a shout out to the journalism Ben Norton's done here. Like I said before, I always considered myself a Marxist-Leninist and a proud anti-imperialist, but the stuff he finds out is quite something. So, title of the article: corrupt firm funded by right-wing candidate, which was Guillermo Lasso, is going to produce the Ecuadorian exit polls. So just to read through here, is there any immediate thoughts from you two on this article and the issue of exit polling?
Well, I think polling in general is something that can very easily be manipulated and very routinely is. in the case of Bolivia, for example, the main polls underestimated the support for the left by over 10%. And why was this? It was because most of their polling samples were taken in the big cities, and various methods such as using online or phone surveys, something that poorest sections of society don't have constant access to. So these polls give a snapshot of essentially the middle class section of the country, and it's an attempt to manipulate public opinion. It's an attempt to promote the electoral chances of right-wing candidates, and of course, I mean, who has the money to fund these sorts of operations? Of course, it's the right. And I think these exit polls, can vary from country to country. But I think polling in general is a business, is an industry. Polls are commissioned by groups of power. So I think we have to take them with a pinch of salt in any context.
Yeah, I agree. I know that in Venezuela they do have these sorts of polling firms as well that are backing right-wing candidates and whatnot, and it was rampant. It's almost like a playbook now that either outside forces or right-wing forces really try to play in Latin American countries, trying to twist the results and whatnot, when there's an at least an obvious bias, or at most a hand on the scale to push towards a less than stellar victory for left-wing candidates. And like I said, from Venezuela to Bolivia to Ecuador, now Ecuador, looking at this now, it's obvious that it's trying to create more chaos rather than have a outright victory for the left.
So I think, Bay, you're probably one of the best people to speak about this. In terms of like exit polling in the United States, what's the experience really there?
Like it's unfortunately there's a lot of not a lot of attention that goes into exit pollings, and not a lot of attention to the biased nature of whatnot. If we saw in just recently in our presidential election for the Iowa caucus, it was quite contrary to everything that was being told about Bernie Sanders, where Pete Buttigieg was this mayor out of nowhere. He was popular, but winning first in Iowa was just out of this world. And obviously he didn't win the presidential campaign, but we soon later learned that there was a lot of nefarious things going on with the election itself in Iowa, and all these firms, whether it was the shadow app or all the way up to who was really dishing out these exit poll numbers. It was just so out of touch with what the people really wanted. Exit polls, there's a lot of polls or investment. I mean, you have Nate Silver, you have Rasputin, Real Clear Politics. You have a lot of these sites tracking the numbers and whatnot, but these numbers may be based on companies that may not be as reputable. If we again point towards Iowa and see what happened there, and even when things don't match up, the United States just tries to wipe its hands clean from it and say, hey, let's move on to the next one. And either that ultimately, and then they'll either do that or pull the Russian card. It's Russian operatives trying to screw up our elections and whatnot. And obviously it's it's not only false, but a projection of what the United States has done in the past to other countries that attempt free, transparent elections. So it really is I think people are waking up to it, but ultimately, it's not as big in the limelight as Gray Zone and other media outlets really shine in exit polling in Latin America. And I think that's a good thing, and it should be a trend up here.
Yeah, so one of the most ironic points when and you raised about the specter of oh no Russian interference is the U.S. literally played a key part in rigging the elections for Yeltsin, and I believe it was 96. Yeah, 1996. So you want to talk, you want to talk about the definition of projection. It's quite literally making these deranged claims of Russian interference there. For sure. And so I think now might be a good time basically to actually watch the documentary by Ben Norton. Ben Norton yet again is a major friend of basically at least this stream. So let me just quickly bring this on up. And here it is.
The South American nation of Ecuador is currently suffering.
Okay, just check quickly. Yeah, no, people should be able to hear it. Okay.
The South American nation of Ecuador is currently suffering through its worst economic crisis in decades. Poverty is skyrocketing, corruption is rampant, and the US-backed government has shown itself to be deeply undemocratic. On February 7th, Ecuador will hold a historic election that could fundamentally change its direction, moving the nation away from its current neoliberal policies and reliance on Washington, and restoring the socialist-oriented program of former President Rafael Correa, who launched a progressive movement called the Citizens' Revolution. Today, Ecuador's sitting president, Lenin Moreno, has a mere 8% approval rating, making him the most unpopular leader in the country's modern history. Under Moreno's rule, the government has imprisoned and exiled many left-wing political leaders, banned pro-Correa electoral candidates, gutted social programs, destabilized Latin American regional institutions, and heavily indebted Ecuador with billions of dollars in loans. And in a historic act of betrayal, Moreno renounced the asylum that Correa had given to WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange, allowing British authorities to enter Ecuador's sovereign embassy in London and arrest the Australian journalist. Unemployment, inequality, and hardship have reached peak levels, with more than 58% of Ecuadorians living in poverty and nearly 39% in extreme poverty, according to the United Nations. Meanwhile, Ecuadorians have...
Okay, all right, sorry. I just saw the message from Bay. It wants to pause. Bay, you have thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely. So, as this is a great video, and as it has shown, Moreno has really flip-flopped from Correa. Correa was, pushing this citizens revolutionary movement, and it was really effective, and everybody thought Moreno was going to do that, but he just did this 180, not only doing what this video says, but and I think it will get to it later, but striking down a lot of the social welfare programs and cutting so many public sector jobs that really exacerbated the COVID crisis. On top of all that, when this video touches about it, but when he opened up Ecuador to all these loans, these are all connected. These methods, I think it's really important to note how the IMF works or the World Bank works when you take out these loans, and not only why Ecuador is pushing for this, quote unquote austerity for these loans, because this is what the IMF does. You have to meet certain conditions in order to get IMF loans, and it includes privatization, dwindling social welfare programs, reducing social welfare programs, and all these awful austerity measures that really hurt the people. And the loans mainly benefit those on top. So that's why also when China offers loans, it's really in more favorable interest rates, and it doesn't require you to change your entire system, like IMF or other Western institutions or even Western countries demand. So this is the danger of what Moreno really was putting Ecuador in by the time he took power and continued his uh, totally backwards initiatives.
All right, are we good to keep going with the video? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. All right, let's keep going.
Endured a catastrophic response to the COVID-19 pandemic with one of the highest per capita death rates in the entire world. In 2020, Ecuador's GDP shrunk by an estimated 11%. For sale and for rent signs are visible on properties throughout the capital of Quito. I visited Ecuador this February to cover its election and speak with citizens who have borne the brunt of the economic crisis overseen by the country's US-backed government. As you can see behind me, I'm at a rally here in Quito, Ecuador. This is the closing of the presidential electoral campaign. The election is going to be held on February 7th, and this has been a really brutal election for a lot of people. The current US-backed government of Lenin Moreno has aggressively tried to prevent the left wing from being able to participate in the election, banning the party of the left-wing candidate Andrés Saras, and also preventing the former presidential candidate Rafael Correa from being vice president. Despite all of the many obstacles presented by the Lenin Moreno government, the left-wing citizens' revolution movement is still very powerful. As you can see, there are thousands of people gathered here to participate in this process. I'm going to speak with some of them and hear what they have to say.
Apoya la revolución ciudadana porque durante los 10 años que estuvo Rafael Correa al frente del país, lo sacó adelante de muchas formas, desde la educación, desde la construcción de obras, la salud, y nunca dejó de lado al pueblo, sino que siempre estuvo preocupado de todos los beneficios para el pueblo.
Yo apoyo a la revolución ciudadana porque tuvimos con Rafael Correa un 10 años de década ganada, que la década ganada significa prosperidad, significa educación, significó lo que es salud, dignidad en sí. Y por ello tenemos a nuestro binomio Andrés Arauz y Carlos Rabascal, es para salir adelante, para acabar con la iniquidad, la oligarquía. La derecha nos tiene asumidos y nosotros vamos a rescatar el país. Muy bien.
El gobierno que está terminando en este rato, un gobierno con un control absoluto sobre los medios de comunicación, sobre las cortes, sobre todos los poderes del Estado, no por voluntad democrática de la gente, sino que por operaciones fraudulentas. No es ningún eufemismo. Tenemos una base norteamericana hoy día en las Islas Galápagos, definida por el inteligente ministro de Defensa como las Islas Galápagos como un portaaviones naturales. Lo único que nos falta a nosotros es colocar la bandera norteamericana en un lado de Carondelet y la bandera de la Unión Europea en el otro lado de Carondelet, porque aquí no se decide absolutamente nada.
Ecuador's February 7th election has boiled down to two main choices, and the difference could not be any starker. On one side is the right-wing candidate Guillermo Lasso, a banker who served as economic minister when Ecuador suffered through a financial meltdown in 1999 that bankrupted millions of citizens and destroyed their life savings. Lasso, who has long been credibly accused of corruption and the use of offshore tax shelters, has the staunch support of Ecuador's wealthy economic elites and the United States. On the other side is left-wing candidate Andrés Arauz, a young economist who follows in the footsteps of former President Correa and his movement, known as Correísmo, and wants to bring back his socialist policies. Arauz has built a huge grassroots following in a presidential campaign based on his promises to tax the rich, to give $1,000 checks to 1 million poor and working class families, and to abandon suffocating and extremely unpopular economic agreements that Ecuador's current Moreno government signed with the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Arauz also plans to revive regional institutions to integrate Ecuador's economy with other Latin American countries, and he wants to return to closer business ties with China, just as his mentor Correa had done. Virtually all polls show Arauz leading and likely to win the presidential election, if the vote is free and fair. The fact that the leading presidential candidate wants to reject the IMF and seek deeper economic relations with Beijing has angered Washington, which has meddled in Ecuador's internal affairs and thrown its weight behind the banker Lasso.
Aquí en el imperialismo lo que hemos tenido es la oligarquía, totalmente la opresión, la discriminación muchas veces también, la falta de derechos. Aquí la lucha de la mujer revolucionaria es conseguir totalmente nuestros derechos como mujeres, porque quiero que en mi país nuevamente volvamos a tener los derechos como mujeres, como seres humanos.
Lamentablemente, una vez que se alcanzó el gobierno, se produjo una venta de ese gobierno a los sectores oligárquicos, a la banca, a los medios de comunicación que están justamente cooptados por los grupos de poder.
Ha sido totalmente una destrucción, como se ha hablado, una traición no a Rafael Correa, sino al pueblo ecuatoriano. Y lo traicionó uniéndose a los banqueros, a Lasso principalmente, al FMI, a Estados Unidos, a todo lo que de cierta manera nos causó daño.
Under the US-backed Lenin Moreno administration, Ecuador has attacked regional institutions, withdrawing from the Bolivarian Alliance, or ALBA, a trade bloc of left-wing Latin American countries, and taking Ecuador out of the Union of South American Nations, or UNASUR, kicking out the international body's Quito-based headquarters. While overseeing widespread corruption and looting of public money, the Moreno government also ensnared Ecuador with billions of dollars in loans from the IMF. As part of an austerity package demanded by the IMF, Moreno announced in 2019 a series of aggressive neoliberal reforms, which included cutting 23,000 state sector jobs and ending long-time fuel subsidies, which nearly doubled the price of gasoline. The proposed austerity package kicked off a massive uprising in October 2019. Labor unions organized strikes, while indigenous groups and students held massive protests that brought the country to a halt. The Moreno government responded with brutal violence. Police shot protesters, killing several, injuring more than 1,000, and detaining another 1,000. The Correísta movement decided to close its electoral campaign this February 4th at a park in the heart of the capital, Quito, known as the Parque del Arbolito. This location was deeply symbolic because it was here that the uprising against Moreno's neoliberal reforms started in October 2019.
No ha habido libertad de expresión. Con la prensa, con el CNE, hemos peleado duro y feo, hemos venido a luchar aquí en lo que es la capital.
Es real los videos que pasaban, gente muerta en las calles, sentimos un total abandono, sin gobierno, sin política pública, sálvese como pueda, y es que sin vacunas, sin política, sin atención médica, pero con mucho dinero los banqueros y los corruptos de este país.
De lo que se trata hoy día es la reconstitución de todos los organismos que han sido desmantelados, por las oligarquías. UNASUR es uno de ellos, tal vez el más importante. Y esta segmentación oprobiosa que ha causado el gobierno que va saliendo, en contra de Cuba, en contra de Venezuela, en contra de Bolivia, en contra de Nicaragua, en contra de todo lo distinto, a este país a un aislamiento absoluto. Aquí se han inventado, por ejemplo, la Guerra Fría, ¿no? la versión ecuatoriana de la Guerra Fría. Entonces somos enemigos de Rusia, somos enemigos de los chinos, somos enemigos de los venezolanos, somos enemigos de los cubanos, somos enemigos de todo lo distinto que se le ocurra a la oligarquía acá.
Rafael Correa remains the most popular politician in Ecuador. In his 10 years as president, from 2007 to 2017, Ecuador's poverty rate plummeted, the minimum wage increased rapidly, and the government invested billions of dollars in universal health care, education, and advanced infrastructure. While Ecuador is still a developing, formerly colonized nation, it has significant natural resources that could make the country rich. These include substantial oil and mineral reserves, such as gold, silver, and copper. For decades, these resources were monopolized by a small handful of Ecuadorian oligarchs. Correa was the first leader to use the country's plentiful natural resources to instead fund popular social programs. Correa also pursued an independent foreign policy, strengthening relations with China and Russia, collaborating closely with other socialist governments in Latin America, and committing Ecuador to political and economic integration with its neighbors. Correa spoke with the Gray Zone editor-in-chief Max Blumenthal about the stakes of the February election.
En Ecuador se ha roto permanentemente el Estado de Derecho, se apoderaron del Estado con una consulta absolutamente fraudulenta, sin control constitucional, manipulada, y no contentos con eso, se apropiaban de esa forma de un consejo que nombraba a todas las autoridades de control, que el gobierno de Ecuador se ha sometido totalmente a los intereses de Estados Unidos, sobre todo para tratar de perseguir a los líderes progresistas nacionales y tratar de atentar contra la estabilidad de Venezuela. Es evidente aquello. Entonces están realmente desesperados, son capaces de cualquier cosa, porque para ellos lo peor es que nosotros ganemos, porque saben que tendrán que responder ante la justicia. No somos gente vengativa, pero hay que hacer justicia, sin odio, pero con memoria. Entonces están dispuestos a todo. Yo sí le pido al mundo estar muy atentos sobre lo que pasa en Ecuador en estas elecciones.
Under Correa's leadership, Ecuador launched the Progressive Citizens Revolution, which fundamentally transformed the country and is still a powerful force today. At the rallies in the country's two biggest cities, Quito and Guayaquil, working-class Ecuadorians showed their undying support for this revolution.
Yo ya viví 10 años de cambio, viví 10 años de equidad, viví 10 años de política pública en favor del pueblo, de las mayorías, y por eso yo quiero que vuelva la revolución ciudadana.
Ahora mismo hemos vivido un proceso electoral que ha sido muy complicado, ya que hemos tenido que ver la forma, la manera de cómo a través de medios alternativos poder tener canales a través de las cuales poder comunicar a la población el plan de gobierno de Andrés Arauz.
Que es una revolución que nos ha dado prueba de libertad, independencia y de justicia social. Por eso yo apoyo a Andrés Arauz y Carlos Rabascal. Esto decidí usar desde que comenzó el periodo de Rafael Correa Delgado, porque es un revolucionario que hizo revolucionar el país y a través de su gobierno nos dio libertad, nos dio equidad, nos dio el apoyo a la mujer.
Nearly all polls show leftist candidate Andrés Arauz easily winning Ecuador's February 7th election. Yet the Ecuadorian media's reliance on a corrupt firm funded by right-wing candidate Guillermo Lasso to produce exit polls after the vote is one of many signs of potential irregularities. The Ecuadorian people, however, seem ready to fight. The massive turnouts for the Correísta movement's demonstrations in the major cities, with tens of thousands of working-class people flooding the streets and parks, reflects a popular outrage in the country and a widespread yearning to return to the citizens' revolution.
All right, so that was the documentary. Honestly, quite the watch, and I've already watched it before, but yet again, it never fails to impress. So overall thoughts, basically, just after watching the documentary. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it's an important overview of what's been going on in Ecuador for the past 4 years. I, myself lived in Ecuador, and I was there during the uprising in October of 2019. The uprising was total in the city of Quito, everywhere burning tires, roads completely blocked by protesters. Everything, the president had to flee the capital and to govern from the coastal city of Guayaquil. It was a historic moment, and it was a rebellion against the IMF and against the economic crisis, the impoverishment, the general impoverishment that was coming back with a vengeance, thanks to the IMF deal that had come with it with the requirement of numerous austerity measures. The country was falling apart day by day through just the poor management of Ecuador's elite, and co-governing, not in a formal coalition, but under a political agreement. Guillermo Lasso has been part of everything that's happened for the past 4 years, so he's the candidate of continuity. I think we should keep an eye on what's going to be happening for the second round. I have to remember, the electoral commission that's organizing these elections were the ones that banned Rafael Correa from standing, that banned Andrés Arauz's party from standing. His first party was called Centro Democrático, and that was banned from standing. They had to create a new one. And that's what it's called, UNES, and that's what they're standing under now. It's just a shell company, essentially, because the real party was banned. So this is an electoral council commission that has played an activist role against the left. And so I think they could pull anything out of the bag between now and April, which is when the second round will be.
Yeah, speaking of that exact subject, there's an interesting tweet from Camila, where I guess I want to get basically, I guess, Bay's thoughts, since Ollie just spoke for a bit. Thoughts on Camila's tweet.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise. There is some sort of collaboration, whether it's between the banker or the liberal, because both represent the interests of the United States. This is, although this is a semi-new playbook that United States may back somebody like Perez, despite not being like a banker like Lasso. It's really telling how far, how messed up this would go. Now, I would say that looking at the current election results and as Ollie mentioned, the difficulties that the election commission already put out there for the leftist party, it's kind of showing the flaws of why these systems are incredibly easy to corrupt to outside forces like the United States and whatnot. And even, let's say this is all 100% legit, and there's just like the election commission is just playing, these little games. It's really frustrating to see how we on the left have to play by all these rules and still get oppressed and stifled on, and all these limitations on us, yet we are still having these victories and having these triumphs, and it's still downplayed. It's a long, arduous road ahead for the citizens' revolution in Ecuador. And I really, really am hoping the best, and don't get discouraged whether Perez or Lasso wins.
Absolutely. So I guess my question would actually be to Ollie. You mentioned Bolivia, basically the movements there for very good reason. So Do you see similarities like at the point we are now between kind of the point where basically the MAS was able to rightfully take back control of the country? Do you see like similarities to the point where are at currently and some of the experiences during the Bolivian resistance?
Yeah, I think there's a number of differences with the situation in Ecuador. I think the mass in Bolivia is something that has a much stronger link to social movements at a grassroots level, to unions, things like that. And that's part of why the victory was so overwhelming against the coup. Landslide victory, more than, well, around double the vote compared to the neoliberal candidate, Carlos Mesa. In Ecuador, Andrés Saras has won the election. He came first. Correísmo is the largest political force in the country. However, their victory wasn't as overwhelming as that of the MAS. In Bolivia, he's on at the moment 32.7% of the vote. And that's part of that is because it is the party that they have is a traditional party in terms of, you know, is a group of individuals who joined out of conviction, commitment to a cause. So that's different to the MAS, which is built out of a coalition of different social movements, where one doesn't join as an individual, one joins on a collective basis. So you know, there are differences in a number of ways, and I think these differences are very interesting. I think discussing these differences can illuminate discussions about what way forward for the left in one's own country. I think the MAS's more organic approach has been more successful. I think that's important to note. But you know, we mustn't forget that Correísmo won the election. They're the largest political party in the country, and they've faced a lot of the same things that the MAS did on a slightly less intense scale. They've had their leaders exiled, jailed. Correa himself is in exile. Correa's vice president, they're called Jorge Glass. He's currently in jail. He has COVID in jail. He's not a young man, so you know, hopefully he'll be able to pull through. He's being kept in awful conditions. Same is true for most of Correa's former ministers. The leaders within Ecuador of Correa's party were persecuted. I remember when there was the uprising in October, they wanted to charge the leader Virgilio Hernandez, who's an indigenous Ecuadorian, who's the leader in Congress of Rafael Correa's party. They wanted to charge him with terrorism for supporting the protests. That's the conditions that they've had to operate under, and even in those conditions, they've won. They're the largest party in the country, even though the whole state was mobilized into just deleting them from existence. So I think that's an incredibly important thing to remember. That it is possible to organize and to win even in the worst conditions.
For sure there. I guess one of my questions would be, there's obviously efforts to privatize the central bank, I believe, by Moreno. So what do you think the impact of this the election and the fact that it's going into a second round is going to have on said efforts?
I don't know. Should I come back on that, or do they want to?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're good.
Okay, sorry. Could you repeat the question, sir?
Yeah, so I was going to say with Moreno's kind of push to privatize the central bank, I believe. How do you think that's going to be? How do you think that's going to be impacted now by the fact that there's going to be a second round and basically Arauz just can't assume power?
Well, yeah, I think they're certainly going to try and rush through a number of measures, austerity measures, privatizations, which would, if the second round is carried out fairly and Arauz wins, which he would if the elections are fair, policies that they would not implement or try to reverse. So we're going to see There are attempts to privatize the country's central bank, something that exists already in a lot of countries like the UK, for example, under, they say the independent central bank independence. And this is a cornerstone of good governance, etc. What it actually means is that a country can't have control over its monetary policy. It's a blow against the sovereignty the government has. It stops the government being able to plan effectively to meet people's needs. So that would be incredibly damaging, incredibly difficult to reverse. So, a lot of the efforts in Congress are going to be going into trying to stop that. But in Congress, who are the forces that are supporting this? Guillermo Lasso's party, also Yaku Perez's party, Pachacuti. And they also voted for the so-called humanitarian law, which basically stripped workers' rights under the pretext of, cutting red tape so as to, bring back jobs. The only result has been, the unemployment has only decreased, and now people are left without labor rights. So some of the measures I think include withdrawing the right to strike for huge sectors, making it easier for bosses to fire workers without reason or without having to pay a set amount, a sort of lump sum, something that was introduced under Correa, that if you fire a worker, you have to pay them, I think, a month's salary as a sort of breaking off gift. That has been withdrawn, so it makes it easier for bosses to fire workers. It cuts the salaries in a number of sectors. That was supported by both Yaku Perez and Guillermo Lasso. So we can see this alliance of elite interests to try and stop the Ecuadorian left from taking power. They have a lot more in common with each other than they do with the left, which is why you're likely to see, over the next couple of months, lots of articles. There's already been lots of articles in Western media, Western liberal media, presenting Yaku Perez as, the real left, as a progressive, but it's not the case at all.
Alrighty, so I think we've pretty much gone through as much as we possibly can, especially I think at this point. Is there either one of you think there's anything we've really missed so far in our discussion?
No, just wanted to say thanks for having us, Ollie. I really do enjoy your work and everything that's going on in Bolivia. It's a really important voice that you all are having down there. But also this discussion about Ecuador, just adds on to the movements that are happening that everybody really needs to keep their eye on. Whether it's Ecuador, Chile, Venezuela, Bolivia, Nicaragua, and all these leftist movements that are happening against the imperialism of the United States, and how the United States is continuing to meddle in their affairs. We really need to be against that, and obviously, the more limited the United States is, the better the people can position themselves towards victory. So
Ollie, any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Thanks to Bay as well for helping this discussion. It's been a really interesting discussion. I hope that these issues that I think most of the media outlets don't want to talk about. So I think it's our job to try and insert ourselves into that conversation.
All right, for sure. So I've put a few links in the Twitch chat, Bay's Twitter, Ollie's Twitter. I put my Patreon in there. I probably should actually link my own Twitter as well for anyone who hasn't seen that. And I obviously mentioned put the Patreon down there if you want to support financially the journalism that I do. Obviously, definitely try to go and support the work for that Ollie and Bay both do. It's terrific work, and can't recommend supporting them enough. Yeah, so I don't, just a final reminder, I would say, basically, if you haven't followed Twitch yet and you're still here, please do follow. Streams are going to be happening Wednesday and Sunday night. Wednesday night is Canadian foreign policy. Sunday night is Canadian domestic policy, with at least one kind of special stream basically per week under the banner of the Aiden Jonas Show. So, and obviously the Canada Files itself as an entity, definitely go, you have to go follow the Canada Files, go check out the website, and go check out our YouTube channel as well. So I will say on the Canada Files front, I'll have some news to drop actually, because I'm going to be changing up the core content and core focus. We're going to be changing from more of a daily news site to one that's more focused on investigations, basically news analysis, and just critical looks into issues. Basically, essentially, we want to have articles that aren't just relevant for the day. That we want the focus to change, and the major thing is just to raise the level of quality up another level. Things are definitely have been fortunate to go very well so far, but really inspired by the gray zone and the model that they have. You just figured, and I talked to contributors and such, and we kind of came to the conclusion that it was time to take a little bit of a brave new step forward. So certainly hoping people will enjoy that. Anyways, thank you so much yet again to Bay and Ollie. Can't thank you both enough. It was fantastic to discuss some of these really important issues with you. And a little shout out to Mango Press, because they were supposed to pop on, but things didn't work time-wise. Definitely go check out Mango Press, and I'll try to have them on for a future stream. Anyways, yet again, thank you so much to everyone. I'll stop going over the same things. Catch y'all later. And